Oh, hey, Marco. How are you? I was just reading a little comic book. It's Sazae-san, The Wonderful World of Sazae-san. It is bilingual. It has both English and Japanese in it. It's quite basic for me because it's just a neighborhood story, easy to read. So yeah, I've had this for some time and I'm just rereading it again. So Marco, how are you? Right. I have it under good authority that you like to draw. Is that right? I like to draw too. I still do. I also like to tell stories. And when you put the two together, drawing and storytelling, that's a comic book. I love comic books. Let me tell you a short story. When I was little, probably around your age, I started reading comic books. We didn't have internet back then, of course. It wasn't available yet. So I'd go to the neighborhood store, and read their comic books there, and I pay 50 cents in the Philippines. And then my dad would call me, and then I'll walk home from there, and he'll see me. Next day, same thing will happen. My dad will call me, and I'll walk home, and then he'll see me again, and then the next day, and the next day after that. So he started seeing a pattern. And one day he just had to ask me. He said, Gordon, why do you always come from that store when I call you? What is it that you do there? I said, oh, nothing. I just read comic books. And he said, you read comic books? I said, yeah. It's entertaining. And he asked me, do you pay for that? I said, yeah, well, it's a store, so yeah, you have to pay for it. It's a rental comic book, so you read it there on the spot. You don't take it with you. And I paid 50 cents. But back then, 50 cents is a bit expensive. And of course, I'm just a little boy. I don't have a lot of money to throw away like that. So he told my mom, and then my mom took me to the shopping mall one weekend and bought random comic books. I've never even heard of those characters before. One of them had Donald Duck in it, of all things. So yeah, I got my own comic books, and of course the printed newspaper had little comic strips in it, so I read those too. And because I like to draw, I also started drawing my own comic books. And of course, my siblings saw this, and they thought it was a bit silly or whatever. I don't have them anymore. That was a long time ago. Of course, the paper wouldn't survive to this day. But yeah, up to this point, I love doing comic books. So, since you like to draw, have you tried making your own comic books or comic strips? It's just one little strip with a short story in it, maybe a short joke or something. So yeah, you can try that. So what you can do is, of course, you have to draw the characters. You have to draw them consistently. So if you draw the same character repeatedly enough, you'll end up getting enough practice, and they'll look the same every single time. So when someone else is reading your comic book, they'll know, oh, that's the same character. But let me go ahead and give you some tips on how to create your comic book. The very first tip that I will give you is the most important one, I think, anyway. So you have to write the words first, and then you draw the speech balloon or speech bubble or whatever other people call this. I'll call it the speech balloon. So write the words first, then draw the bubble. That's the most important. What a lot of kids do is they draw the bubble, and then they write the words inside the bubble, and they run out of space and they get frustrated, so forget it. And it ends up going outside the bubble. So to make it look like you're a pro at doing comic books or comic strips, write the words first and then draw the bubble. And of course, since we're talking about speech bubbles, there are many kinds of speech bubbles. One of them is the normal speech. So usually I start with the tail and then draw the bubble around all the words. That way I can point the tail of the speech bubble to the character speaking it. And it's normal speech bubble is just, a round thing with the tail on it. You can do the yelling speech bubble, and to do that you have to have one sharp tail and lots of sharp lines going around the speech bubble. And then next one is you can do crying. You can do a wavy tail and then a wavy outline border of the speech bubble, so it's crying. I didn't do this really well because I just did it in a hurry, but the singing speech bubble down here. Singing one is you have to make the tail wavy and the rest of the bubble wavy as well, but more evenly matched. That's the difference between the crying and the singing. And of course I didn't do it that well here. When the waves of the speech bubble are evenly spaced out, it's very harmonious, so it makes it look like the character is actually singing. And then there's this thing that looks like a yelling speech bubble, but it's I call it the chainsaw speech bubble, because the teeth look like chainsaw, but it's for electronic voice. So when a voice of a robot, for example, is singing, or someone on the TV or someone on the phone is speaking to the character, you make it sound like this, so the sound is more electronic like. And of course the tail of the speech bubble is a lightning tail. That's the difference between this one and the yelling one. The lightning tail makes it look more electronic. And then there's the text block. The text block is when what you use when the character is reading something and you can hear the sound reading. Well, you can't really hear it, it's a comic book, but it gives the impression that the character is reading instead of speaking. You can also put point the tail at a book or a sign, for example, on the wall. So it's being read. It's not being spoken. It's being read. So that's what the text block is. And this one down here, when the character is whispering, you just have to make the speech bubble with broken lines like this. So it's very similar to a normal speech bubble. You point the tail at the speaker and then broken line. So it's a softer tone. So yeah, that's another one, very useful one. And of course, we all have our brains working all the time. We're all thinking. So there is the thinking bubble. So basically, you create a cloud around what the character is thinking, and then you instead of a tail, you put 3 or maybe 4 smaller clouds, and that gives the impression that the character is thinking. It's not saying things out loud. And this one here, it looks just like a normal speech bubble, but it has these little spikes at the end of the tail. This means that the speaker is out of view. So when you use a hidden speaker speech bubble, you create the words, the speech bubble, and then point it at something instead of someone, like a wall, for example, behind a door. And you add these little spikes at the end to make it look like they're behind that door speaking. The next one is this one. It's the huge or the tiny speech bubbles. Changing the size of the speech bubble implies a change in volume or distance. So if someone is really far away, you create the speech bubble really tiny. So on the paper, it looks like they're far away and they're speaking. You could barely hear the character could barely hear the speaker. When they're very close by, without actually yelling, but they're close by, or the person speaking is much larger than the character. You can use the huge speech bubble, or when the voice is booming, for example, you can do that. So changing the size changes the perceived sound of the speech. And then this one is, I call this one the paranormal, that one. It's a speech bubble with double straight lines. So I do that when the character speaking is not a person. So it's a monster or an angel or an animal that speaks. Of course, normally animals don't talk, so they can do that. If your characters are all animals anyway, you don't really need this. So, for example, like a rock monster talking to a normal human, you'll use this speech bubble for the rock, the normal speech bubble for the human character. And then this one here is ambient sounds. Ambient sounds is there is no speech bubble, it's just a pointer to where the sound is coming from. So this could be any sound that is not someone speaking. So it's birds chirping, someone is cooking, so the sizzling of the food. Someone is opening a very squeaky door, so that the squeak sound. So you'll point these pointers at the item making the sound. You change the shape of the pointer depending on how soft or harsh the sound is. If it's kind of annoying, the more wavy it will be, the pointer. If it's nice and soft and soothing, maybe a little bit of a curved sound. If it's a direct sound, like someone dropped a hammer on the floor and it's making a noisy sound like clang, then you can use the direct pointer sound. And this one here is another way to create noise in a comic book or comic strip. So just big letters, no speech bubble, no pointer, nothing. It's just big letters. So if a car is zooming, for example, you'll say vroom, and then it's just big letters, VROOOOM, and then it almost takes up the entire panel. So you can do that. So that's just some of the things the pointers that I can give you. And maybe the last one I could give you is when you're drawing the speech bubble, it always has to go behind the character that you've drawn. It's a bit silly if you draw a character and then the speech bubble covers parts of their body or their head or whatever. So always put the speech bubble behind the character. So let me give you a sample. So someone out of view, so you use the hidden speech bubble with the 4 spikes, is asking who wants to go to the beach. And then this character says me and raises his hand. So when the raised hand, and I drew the speech bubble behind the hand and then drew the words behind them. So imagine if this speech bubble was covering the hand. It doesn't kind of make sense. Unless, rules can always be broken. Unless you're trying to make a joke, someone is talking over someone else, where you cover the speech bubble intentionally covers up the character. If it's done on purpose like that, it's okay. So yeah, I wish I could show you the comics that I did draw back then. Of course, they were just simple line drawings with some words on it, very simple stories. But yeah, it was a long time ago, so they don't survive. Anyway, I still like drawing nowadays, but at the moment it's just illustrations, not actually comics or anything like that. I hope you found that useful. Maybe you could share it with your sister Elise and your other cousins like Mateo and Sophia and Gavin, and maybe your classmates. Yeah, so make your comic book, so show me what you've done, and I'm sure it'll be good. I can't wait for you to come visit me, but till then, take care.